Hello, my name is Angela Schumann and I am the Shakespeare Whisperer, and we are being rejoined once again by Dr. Peter Groves to continue with our Measure for Measure series. So this is our second video in the series and we will be continuing with our reading of the play. So last time we covered some basic introductory stuff and we looked at the first couple of scenes.
Yes, let's be precise. I think it was 2 scenes, so we're actually on Act 1, Scene 3 now.
Perfect.
It would be helpful if you had a copy of the text open in front of you.
Yes, I endorse this message. Yes, it would be good to follow along. Basically what we've established so far is some key themes that have already popped up this early in the play. Namely the ideas around power, corruption, and self-knowledge and self-deception. We've seen a monarch, the Duke, who has mysteriously stepped down from his position and put into power a young, untested man called Angelo, who is supposedly perfect and sort of above suspicion. But there are some suspicions here and some inklings that maybe he will fall and fall hard. We've also been introduced to this shocking situation in which a young man, Claudio, has been arrested for fornication. He has a kind of technical common law marriage with his wife, but because of this legal technicality, they're not quite married, and Angelo, who is a very puritanical character, has crushed them down with the weight of the law and dragged this man off to prison. As Claudio's being dragged to prison, he's kind of like, oh, you know, my one phone call, I want my lawyer. He asks for his sister, who we haven't met yet. He says, bring me my sister, for she has a prone and speechless dialect such as move men. And we've had a look at what that could potentially mean and the different layers of that. She is very articulate and intelligent, but also perhaps there's another reason that men do what she asks.
Exactly. And to make it all the more unjust, this law has been on the statutes, but not enforced for 20 years or so. So all of a sudden, to seize on poor old Claudio doesn't look particularly fair or just or equitable.
Yeah, everyone's been doing it, and we see him in a brothel of all places, and yet he's the one being arrested.
Exactly so. So we begin scene 3 with the Duke and a friar, Friar Thomas. And he begins by saying, "No, Holy Father, throw away that thought. Believe not that a dribbling dart of love can pierce a complete bosom. Why, I desire thee to give me secret harbour hath a purpose more grave and wrinkled than the aims and ends of burning youth." So, complete means armoured. So he's saying he's armoured against Cupid's arrows. Love has no effect on him. He's above all that. And of course, interestingly, we'll find this is very much the attitude of the much younger figures, Angelo and Isabella too. They all believe they're above such trivialities as love and
Temptation.
yes. Superior to them.
There's a little bit of working out of the context that we have to do here. It's curious that this scene begins with a denial, no, and you're like, well, what was being asked? And we can figure out that the priest, the friar, assumed that the Duke wanted to use his cell for a tryst, for a secret love affair. That was the first assumption when the Duke came knocking, which I think is tells us something interesting about the Duke's character.
Yes, and well, he's got form, I imagine, and we learn later on in the play of form. That's the slang term. Oh, sorry, that means I think it's a racing term. It means a history of behaving in a certain way. Or a criminal. Criminals have form. Sorry, your expression made me realise it wasn't crystal clear. We learn later in the play that he's been making a habit of dressing up as a friar and hanging around Mariana in her moated grange, which is a little bit questionable in the behaviour of a Duke.
A little bit weird. So if you're not careful, you might miss it and just take him at his word. But we see, okay, there's a reason why he needs to deny this assumption.
Yes. Rather forcefully. Of course, when people deny stuff that forcefully, it's like the recent, cases of sexual harassment. When people always described as making, or the men are described as making a vigorous denial. And it seems to me a vigorous denial is actually more suspicious than a simple deny. No, it's absurd. You know, what are you talking about? I wouldn't do such a thing. Never do such a thing. Not me. Good Lord, ask everybody. So
the lady does protest too much.
Methinks. Yes, exactly.
There's also another interesting thing going on here. So we're seeing a clash of secular and religious authority. So the Duke is the king of the land. He's at the top in terms of authority, except when he's in a church, in which case he doesn't have spiritual authority. The friar has authority here. So there's this tension, and we notice that the Duke tries to push his power here in the way that he commands the friar to think. He says, "No, Holy Father," so he's giving him his title of respect. Throw away that thought. So now he's commanding him, telling him what to think. And he says, "Believe not that the dribbling dart of love, blah, blah, blah." Well, you can't really command somebody to believe something or not to believe something. They do or they don't.
It's like saying enjoy Coca-Cola. It makes no sense, actually.
Yeah, that's true. I can't choose to enjoy it. I just do or I don't.
Incidentally, how you raised this, I hope we're going to get beyond line 3.
Oh, this is such a rich, I love this scene. I'll spend all day on it.
It's an extraordinary text, this. But lurking behind this is a big and rather dangerous political issue. Because, as Angela points out, the sovereign doesn't claim to be head of the church. In a Catholic country, the Pope is head of the church. But the big quarrel of Europe with Protestant England was precisely that Elizabeth I claimed to be head of the church in England. That was the reason, you know, the Pope wanted to reclaim England back into the fold why he connived at the Spanish Armada and all those things. So this is actually rather a big issue. Does or should the sovereign have this kind of political power over the church, this spiritual power over the church, or not? And Shakespeare loves to play in dangerous waters. As I said last time, the Duke is, to some extent, a little bit of a parody, a little bit of a naughty parody of his sovereign, King James.
All right, I'm ready to move beyond line
yes.
5 now.
So the Duke begins to explain. May your Grace speak of it. He's very deferential, the friar, but he's not unwilling to rebuke, as we shall see the Duke too, but in very gentle terms.
Yeah, again, that delicate balance of power.
It's like Ophelia rebuking Hamlet, you
Yeah.
know. So he goes on to say that he's basically left Vienna and delivered to Lord Angelo, line 11, a man of stricture and firm abstinence. Interesting word, stricture, actually, because it's a bit of a nonce usage here, a single usage, a hapax usage, as they say.
What is a hapax?
A hapax is a word that's used once in a particular term. Technically, the word is hapax legumenon, a single occurrence of a word. And so sometimes it's hard to know what such a thing actually might mean. But here, it doesn't seem to mean strictness towards others. It refers to constricture, and there's almost a hint here, and this is actually very interesting. I don't want to press this too far, but a hint here almost of a kind of vaguely Freudian theory of repression. His grip is upon his own desires and his own emotions, and that, in a sense, is what is the problem with him, as we find out. So it's quite an interesting word here, even though it's not absolutely clear what it means, being hapax legomenon. That's your useless term for today.
Word of the day.
Word of the day. And he says, and he supposes me travelled to Poland, for so I have strode it in the common ear, and so it is received. Well, of course it is, if the Duke said it. Notice he's using a kind of throwaway euphemism for lying. Now, maybe rulers have to lie to the people, but rulers who regard themselves as sacramentals placed there by God as the embodiment of justice and so on, ought at least to feel a little uneasiness and maybe try to explain to the friar why he has to lie. I mean, maybe you have to lie to a child to get it to take its medicine. That's okay, you can explain that. But not even to notice or care that he's working on a lie here. Just as well, the bigger question of the whole scene is that he is setting up a lie that says this man is a friar, trust him. And he's not a friar. And that's kind of huge. Let me just say finally, there's a saying that Shakespeare's quite fond of, cuculus non facit monachum. That's Latin, and it means the cowl does not make a monk. Just because you're wearing a cowl doesn't mean you're a monk.
That's the hood, isn't it? Or
The
is
hood.
it the whole outfit?
Yeah, but basically the hood, yes. Because you can use a hood to hide the face a bit. Something sinister.
I love that expression. And that is so central to this play as well.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
pops up later, so
Oh, does it?
watch it. In this play, yeah, it does.
The phrase?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd forgotten.
Yeah,
Okay.
You're in for a treat.
Okay.
Also, just finishing off what the Duke's saying here. He says, "Now, pious sir, you will demand of me why I do this." And again, I really enjoy it because on the surface it's kind of like, oh, you will insist, like, okay, if you demand, I'll tell you. But in actuality, he's commanding him, like, you will sweep the floors, you will demand of me. So there's this kind of fake idea that the friar is demanding things of him that he can't deny, when in actuality he's in control.
Exactly.
He's forcing things here. He's calling the shots.
He's the puppet master. He's very much what they used to call back in the 1970s a control freak. Got to go at everything. We'll see this later on when he's in the prison and with Barnardine and so on. He likes to treat people as his own little puppets, his own little sort of toy soldier army. And if they resist him, he gets really quite anxious and angry. So he gives a reason, sort of gives a reason. We have strict statutes and most biting laws. He says we've got all these laws to keep people in order, to keep public peace and so on. Which for this 14 years we have let slip. Now, you'll notice he's been calling himself I up till now, apart from that we have strict statutes, which is referring to the state, I suppose. So who is we here? It's rather a weaselly term. Because he's been calling himself I, it can't mean the royal we. He's trying to evade responsibility for having let these things slip. And then he never actually explains why he lets them slip. He gives us a barrage of words to come in this speech, explaining how if you don't enforce these things, then they're brought into contempt and so on, and things get disorderly, people start misbehaving. But he doesn't say why. He leaves it open. And one has to suspect that it's all really about, well, it's about popularity, public image, looking good, being... And that's really what's behind this whole stratagem here, isn't it? We shall see that it is a stratagem. So, notice he explains, so everything is going to hell in a handbasket, he says, basically. The baby beats the nurse and quite a thought goes all decorum. So disorder is at the root of it all. As I said last time, sexuality is the metaphor, but it's really talking about public disorder, essentially. And sexuality is a metaphor for the disorderliness of the body rising up against the reason and virtue. And the friar delivers this very mild rebuke. It rested in your grace to, this is beg your pardon, line 32 or 31. Rested in your grace to unloose this tide of justice when you pleased, and it in you more dreadful would have seemed than in Lord Angelo.
I was going to point out quickly, in terms of the way that the lines are written, if you've got your edition in front of you, we see, or even if you haven't, you can look at mine, we see that the line begins here and then is ended by the other character. This happens again. The line is begun here and a different character ends it. And if you count the lines with the little numbers at the edge, you'll notice that when one character begins and the other character ends it, that is the one line. It's what's called a split line or a shared line, in which one character begins and the other finishes it off. And sometimes it can be used to show a beautiful symmetry and harmony in characters, and at other times it can be used to show an interruption or perhaps a power struggle. And I think that that's what we're seeing here, that they're cutting each other off a little bit as they're talking in this struggle.
That's right. But, well, because the general rule is if character B completes character A's part line, then it means they're leaping in on the cue. They're coming in quickly. It's an instruction to an actor. Whereas if one character has a short line and then there's silence and the next character begins a new line, that means that the second one is not immediately engaging with what the first one has said. There's a withholding, a thinking, a kind of resistance.
Awkward pause.
An awkward pause. So it's really worth paying attention to these things because they are meaningful. Shakespeare is constantly directing the actors by little hidden, unseen stage directions in the verse form and in the verse structure. I've actually written a book about this. we'll put the reference in the description.
Yes.
And when he says dreadful, he means appropriately, having the appropriate kind of gravitas and awe belonging to a monarch. It's more appropriate that this come from you, the Duke, than from this underling Angelo, who nobody knows or cares about. But he picks up the word, as so often in Shakespeare, and gives it a different spin. I do fear too dreadful, meaning too tyrannical. Yes, exactly. Since 'twas my fault to give the people scope, it's interesting he actually admits it there, 'twould be my tyranny to strike and gall them for what I bid them do. Now, it's interesting, when he says this, he doesn't really mean that it would be tyrannical in him to do this, because it makes no difference. If he is striking and galling them for what they were previously allowed to do, if they're now being punished for it, then it's tyranny either way. It makes no difference who does it, whether he has somebody standing in front or he himself. So in fact, what he's actually doing is he's using a device here which is actually quite rare in literature before the 18th century, really, called free indirect speech. He's kind of implicitly quoting what the people on the street would say. Oh, it's his tyranny to do this. So he doesn't believe it. He doesn't think it's tyrannical at all. Why would he? But he thinks he will get a bad reputation out of this, and he doesn't want that at all costs. So he's going to do it by proxy.
That's so true. I couldn't possibly do this to people. I'll hire someone to do it too.
Exactly. So he says, I have on Angelo, line 40, imposed the office, who may in the ambush of my name strike home, and yet my nature never in the light to do in slander. In the ambush of my name. That's actually rather sinister if you think about it. An ambush is an appearance of safety from which, something rushes out to seize you. And the safety is in the name of the Duke. Oh, the good old Duke, he doesn't matter he doesn't care if people fornicate or if things are disorderly and taverns stay open all night. That's okay, we'll just carry on. And then, wham, out comes Angelo like a spider catching an insect, drags him into the den.
I like that image.
So it's actually a very sinister thing that he's proposing here. And all this brings us back to this question we talked about last time of Machiavelli, the early 16th century philosopher who wrote the book The Prince, which people have argued about his rhetorical intention here. Some people think it might be a satire, in fact, that he's actually taking the mickey out of this kind of behaviour. But what it does is challenge that whole sacramental view of kingship. The king is the source of all virtue and goodness, and God appointed and so on. It's basically a manual for keeping and holding power and keeping order in the state at whatever cost. So moral issues are irrelevant. Lying, cheating, murder, it's all okay as long as you hide it. So you should appear to be good and honest and just and upright and noble and godly. Underneath that, you can do what you like because politics is a morals-free zone. It's an engineering task for keeping public order. And the Duke, who is so full of his own sacramental importance, slides so easily into this. Because what he's actually saying is he's going to get Angelo to come in, do all the heavy stuff, punish people, be unpopular, be brutal. Then he's going to step in, and as he does at the end of the play, and say, look, no, I didn't mean this at all. This terrible man, take him away and execute him. And what's really interesting is that he's actually, Shakespeare is incorporating here an example from Machiavelli's The Prince. Machiavelli illustrates this whole handy device of what should we say, delegating unpleasant, unpopular tasks to subordinates who are dispensable. So they get the job done, but you don't get the blame. There's a kind of shield there. And he talks about Cesare Borgia, the famous Duke of Florence, who had a kind of outlying area that was being unruly and not paying their taxes and, you know, generally having a good time, not following the rules. And so he appointed as the kind of local governor this man who was known to be vicious, basically, vicious and very strict. And this man goes in and, you know, beheads lots of people and terrorizes everybody into conformity and obedience. And then they wake up in one morning and they find this man, Ramiro de Orco or something like that, I think his name is, chopped in half in the public square. And the Duke comes in and says, "My people, I have saved you from this terrible, vicious man who was doing awful things to you. Aren't I wonderful?" Rather like the Duke in Act 5. And so Shakespeare couldn't put it plainer. This man he's written the textbook for Machiavelli in a sense. But at the same time, always I think believing, because he says these things in soliloquy later on. We'll see this coming up. Believing himself to be sacramental and just and upright and noble. So there's a wonderful kind of doublethink going on, a wonderful sort of rationalization, a cognitive dissonance between how he's actually running things and how he thinks he's running things, which is very interesting and very modern.
And what I love about that Machiavellian scheme as well is that not only are the people like, "Oh, you're our savior, we love you, thank you for being the nice guy," but you've also shown that you're stronger than the guy that was bullying them.
Yes.
He's stronger than you, I'm stronger than him.
Yes.
So there's also a fear.
That's right, I'm the big bully.
Attached to that as well.
Yes.
You will love me and respect me and fear me.
Well, that's right. Because
having your cake and eating it.
that's exactly right. Because he doesn't just have the man arrested and carried off in chains, he has him chopped in half. That's peculiarly brutal and savage. So yes, that point is perfectly correct. I am the biggest bully in the pond, and you better conform. But of course, they're not going to resent the killing of this man because he was their tyrant. But they do see it as a sign that the Duke won't stand for any nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant textbook stuff. So he is going to, and to behold his sway, to keep an eye on him, see what's going on. Line 43, "I will as 'twere a brother of your order." See, it becomes euphemistic again. I mean, it's actually going to impersonate a friar, but he's as 'twere, sort of, a bit like, kind of, you know.
Yeah, and he doesn't actually ask, like, would it be okay with you if I borrow your robes and, like, impersonate a brother of your order? Like, he's just like, "And I will, by the way, keep up with the story."
Exactly.
Oops, you didn't know about this part.
Exactly. So therefore I prithee supply me with the habit and instruct me how I may formally in person bear like a true friar. To be like a true friar is to be a false friar. Then he goes on to say, again rather enigmatically, he likes to be a bit sort of enigmatic and to keep things to himself, doesn't he? And to mystify us.
Yes.
He's such a recognisable character, this Duke. "Alam leggere warendi you, only this one," he says. Lord Angelo is precise. Precise is an interesting term here, but it was often used of Puritans. Puritans, early, what should we say, Calvinists, generally Calvinists and Lutherans, who, among other things, were reputed to be fairly kind of strict about matters like, well, basically about having fun. Having fun. We talked about this last week.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, so we needn't labour the point. "Stands at a guard with envy, scarce confesses that his blood flows, or that his appetite is more to bread than stone." possibly an allusion to the parable? Which of your children, if he asks for bread, shall give him a
his
stone?
son asks for bread.
His son
Yeah.
shall give him a stone, or if he asks for fish, shall give him a serpent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
Hence, we shall see if power change purpose, what our seemers be. So the whole thing is a big trap. It's a big, desperately irresponsible social experiment on the people of Vienna.
And it's interesting when he's like, we'll catch out like seemers, people who seem to be something they're not. We'll catch out the false and the pretentious. And it's like, you're dressing up as a priest.
At the very moment
like,
in which
like, this is you, buddy.
That's brilliant. Exactly.
Oh dear. That's 25 minutes.
Oh,
Do you want to cut it off here? Or we could do
okay.
the
Well,
next video.
yeah, we can cut it off.
Yeah.
That's
Alright,
good.
That rounds
A
out
timely chunk.
the scene nicely. So that
It
was,
does.
Act 1, Scene 3 for
Act 1,
you.
Scene 3. We'll get there eventually.